Welcome to Antique Sprinklers. If you're watching my videos in order, you'll know that the last video I put up was the kickoff for a fairly lengthy series of videos about a different product line than we're going to be talking about in this one. And I want to assure you that we are hard at work on the second episode in that series. And the reason for this little departure is I had the opportunity to do something amazing in this hobby just in the last couple of weeks here, and I wanted to share that with you while it was all still fresh in my mind. So as some of you may know, the shed where Orton Englehart invented the impact sprinkler has been preserved in Glendora, California. There's a historical society there that made sure it got moved off of his original property when it was being developed and into one of their city parks there. And a number of the sprinklers that he was working on, plus a little bit of a collection from the Irrigation Association, ended up in this shed. And I've seen pictures of it from shortly after they opened it in this park. It's Centennial Heritage Park in Glendora, by the way. And I thought it was great that they were preserving this really important history. And the American Society of Agricultural Engineers put a plaque up there, taking note of such an important invention it was in really global agriculture. And but when I would look at pictures of the interior, it didn't really look like the sprinklers had been curated at all. There were things lying next to each other that really, at least to me, didn't make a ton of sense as fitting together, other than they were, both sprinklers, that kind of thing. So earlier this year and over the summer, Rainbird created an internship project where 4 of the great-grandchildren of Clement and Betty Lefetra completely reimagined this shed, did a ton of research, had displays built, curated the collection in a meaningful way, and really did a great job of it. I'm hoping I remember all of their names. So there was Elizabeth and Thomas Hanson, Olivia Ludwick, and Stephen Warner. And so during the summer, occasionally a question would come up around about what a certain sprinkler was that they had. And I was fortunate enough to be able to answer maybe a question or two for them. And as they neared the time when they were going to rededicate this shed and hold a ribbon cutting, the whole bit, I got a call from one of their mothers who's on the board of Rainbird, and inviting me out to come out and check out the ceremony. And I jumped at that. There was no way in the world I would miss something to do with historic sprinklers of that magnitude. So it was held over a weekend. The Thursday before the event, my Mrs. Antique Sprinklers and I flew into Los Angeles, and the next morning, the trip had expanded into a nice tour of the Rainbird facility there in Azusa, and we were greeted by the current chairman of the board of Rainbird, Heidi Hanson. And she gave us a great tour there. I got to see where they have this glass display case in the lobby of the original number 60 and the original number 65. It's a massive facility, a couple 100,000 square feet between manufacturing and distribution, at least that much, and a lot of outdoor storage as well. And the good folks there working at Rainbird, Chris and Christopher and Gabby and Stacy just treated us so well, and took very good care of both me and Mrs. Sprinklers, who was kind enough to go along on a tour of an irrigation manufacturing facility, which might not be on a lot of our wives' bucket list, but she really enjoyed it quite a bit. And everybody was great. We had a nice lunch afterwards. Just super, super kind people, very generous with their time. And really Friday was just a wonderful day there at Rainbird. And so then we kind of went our own way Friday evening, had a nice dinner in LA and saw some sights, and then the main event was Saturday morning at Centennial Heritage Park there in Glendora. and we drove over to Glendora City Hall, which is kind of this really cute. It looks like a California building to me. And I have to admit, both in LA and in Glendora, and certainly at the factory and the park, um, even though I live in a very pretty part of the world here near Annapolis, Maryland, I was every bit the tourist. My head on a swivel and looking up at buildings and seeing all the stuff that you see on TV. Even though I've been to LA a handful of times on business, but it's still very cool to me. So this was just a treat on so many levels. So anyway, we go to the city hall, we get picked up there, and the guy driving the car is the chairman of the board emeritus of Rainbird, Art Ludwick, and he takes us over to the park, and we just have a really great day. Art's there, Heidi's there, is Sharon, the daughter that invited me, is there. Their husbands, children, a number of Rainbird employees. I couldn't possibly name them all. Mike Donahue, though, the CEO of Rainbird, who I think flew in probably from Tucson for it. The mayor of Glendora, a number of city officials, local historical officials, and there were many speeches. I think a state senator sent someone to make a speech as well. And then they cut the big green, appropriately enough green for Rainbird ribbon around Orton's shed there. And that's when the real fun started. I got to go in and take a look at the way they displayed all the sprinklers, see what they had. And, some of the displays they built are so great. Orton Englehart actually patented something like 4 sprinklers for Rainbird in, say, the 15 years between 1933 or 35, roughly, to 48 or 50. And so they had these plexiglass displays made where there's a photograph of the patent and then the actual sprinkler itself in it. So I highly recommend, if you're interested in the history of American irrigation, that you find a way to get to Glendora, California, and go to Centennial Heritage Park and check this thing out. Behind the shed, there is a structure that's attached to it that's a roof, and it has one solid wall, and then it's kind of open air on 2 sides. And this is where the casting was done when he was experimenting with sprinklers and maybe even making the first few. And, they have all of his, casting equipment there. And so, I think it was Thomas who was making a sand mold for probably a number 40 lever. And they had where you would melt the brass and the whole bit. And they have some good ideas for activities for local kids and that kind of thing. But the thing that really just impressed the heck out of me, leaning up against one wall were these long tubes, and they were actually sprinklers that Orton, had, but he was, taking them apart and trying to change them in ways that would make them better. And Stephen Ludwick, just from a photograph, and I'll show you what these things look like just up against this wall, was able to figure out what kind of sprinkler it was. And they're ore compound sprinklers. And so you see the photograph. Here is a drawing that was used in an advertisement back in the day when they were for sale. So he correctly identified these things without being able to see the lettering that's on the bearing. I rubbed some dirt off of one, and sure enough, it says ore compound sprinkler right on it. And but he hadn't seen that. And without its distinguishing feature, which is that smaller rotating sprinkler up off of the larger one there that you see on the back end. And that's incredible. I spend a lot of time trying to identify things, trying to find references to different companies, and it's a lot of work. And I am not sure at all. In fact, I'm pretty sure I couldn't have identified what those things were just from the photos in their current condition, after Orton had definitely tinkered with them quite a bit. The other thing that was kind of cool in that back area, the third sprinkler that Orton patented was a whirling style of sprinkler, and it was sold as the Rainbird number 5. But I've never even seen a photograph of one. And on just a shelf there were 4, 5, or 6 of them just lying around. And so it's an incredibly rare sprinkler. And to see that many right there, and they had one also inside, displayed on a stand with a nameplate. And so that was another just incredible thing that, you're walking along and all of a sudden there's something that you never imagined finding in your life right there. The other thing we did, they have a lot of sprinklers that there just wasn't room for. The shed's not really huge, and they made good use of all of the space in it. And even in the display case there's some older molds. There's some experimentation with pop-up sprinklers, and every inch is pretty well accounted for. So we went to one of their cars, and there were these Rubbermaid bins, and I got to go through those and look at some pretty rare sprinklers, and I'll put one on the screen here. That's a pretty cool early attempt at an impact. So it was an amazing morning that we spent there. We ended up having lunch with the host family, and they were just very funny, kind, interesting people, and treated us practically like celebrities. It was just amazing what good folks they were, and we're both my wife Colby and I are very, very grateful for that treatment. And so in this video, we're going to be talking about the number 10 and the number 12D sprinklers. And the reason I chose them was while we were having lunch together at their house, Art had a number 10, and he started talking about its development. And I've had one of these for a fair bit of time. You can see how small these two are. This is just a 25, a half-inch impact sprinkler, and it dwarfs these other two sprinklers. They both have a 1/4-inch inlet. They're tiny. And the idea was they were trying to make a sprinkler for the fruit growers in the Pacific Northwest who grew, fruit on trees there. So they wanted an incredibly low trajectory, very low precipitation rate, and this sprinkler is basically flat. And it has an aluminum arm. It'll run under very low pressure, and so he started talking about that and the challenges with it and how they had continual problems. And all of a sudden, I had the backstory for a sprinkler that I knew absolutely nothing about. And so I thought, in honor of that visit, it would be the perfect sprinkler to tie into a video about that time that we spent there. And so this one is the 12D, and the D designation leads me to believe that there were other attempts at this sprinkler prior to the D coming out. It has a 3/32 nozzle in it, so that's tiny. It's smaller than a 1/8 nozzle, and it has slightly more of a trajectory than the 10 does. And this 10, I can't begin to tell you what size nozzle it is. I guess maybe I could get calipers and measure the orifice in it, because it doesn't have so much of a traditional nozzle as something that's just sitting in an orifice in the body. And it has a very flat trajectory. It has a radius of, I'm going to say, 20-ish feet. And, I was concerned when I was going to run it because of all the trouble that I'd heard it had. But it runs really, really well. I run both of these at about 30 psi. They're meant to operate under low pressure, as I mentioned, so they do great. And in terms of how old they are, they have these copper springs, and that's something that really went away for Rainbird in the early 1960s. So that's where I'm going to age these things at. I'm going to say they're somewhere in the first half of the 1960s, most likely. Maybe they were introduced a little bit in the very late 50s, perhaps. But just a really neat product. For my money, probably the rarest model of a Rainbird Impact is the number 10. There might be specific variants where you tie features together in a single sprinkler to make a really rare 14, say. They made a 14 that had the back part of the lever cut off, just like the 30 and 40 versions. But 14s in general are nowhere near as rare as this number 10 is. So it was great. And it was just a casual conversation that we were having where the topic came up. And so it'd be fun to show side by side the biggest, I just wiped everything out, impact sprinkler that Rainbird made, the 100, and the 10. And I would argue that the 100 is more than 10 times the size of the 10. But I guess you got to start numbering somewhere. And they came out with the 100 before the 10 came along. I'm fairly sure. I think the 10 really was a very early 60s product, and the 100 came along before that. By the way, in Orton's shed, there were molds for making the tubes on the 100, and they were made out of lead. It's really, I'll put up a picture if I have one. It was really an interesting find that those guys had when they were going through all the stuff in that shed. But anyway, here you have it, the very smallest of the impacts and the very biggest of the impacts from Rainbird side by side. Saturday evening, I had the chance to bring some guys who've helped me a ton on this channel together for dinner in LA, and all but one of them had a pretty significant drive to get there. So I'm just so grateful that, you know, Carrie and Frank and then Dave from Old School Sprinklers and I could get together and spend a few hours in the evening, you know, talking shop and getting to know each other a little bit. And, you know, the guys you see on the screen, or that maybe you buy some sprinklers from in Frank's case, are as nice as they seem. I can tell you that. They're just a great bunch of guys, and I'm looking forward to doing it again, hopefully in the not too distant future anyway. So the whole trip was an incredible treat. Seeing the Rainbird factory is something I always want to do. I've been through some other factories in the past, but I didn't quite have the entree to Rainbird back then. And then, you know, the rededication of Orton's shed, getting an opportunity to talk with a few folks there about the history of some of the sprinklers that maybe were lesser known. That was another thrill as well. And then just meeting some of the nicest people you'll ever meet in your whole life. And, you know, he said it so much better than I could, but to me, it kind of sums up where Rainbird has done things correctly, whereas some of the companies that I was familiar with that went by the wayside kind of got into trouble. And, you know, in particular, he was asking my opinion about, you know, sort of the downfall of Buckner after they'd had such a tremendous lead in that industry. And, you know, he summed it up by saying, oh, they strictly became an economic entity. And I think that's very true. And he said, you know, one of the things that pleased him so much, and they were his grandchildren who were working on the display, and obviously, you know, Clem and Betty's great grandchildren, as I mentioned that. And he said, you know, he was so pleased by that, to have the family really engaged. And there's a lot of the family on the board too, because the company can be treated as a family heirloom, and you treat it differently when you have that sort of thought process about it. And he said it's possible for it to be both an economic entity and a family heirloom, and that's how it ought to be. And it's hard for me to argue with that, you know, from that little shed in Glendora where a guy was just trying to water his own citrus better, and then his buddy who sold, I guess, fertilizer to different farmers would show him one of the sprinklers and they'd use it and love it. You know, from those humble beginnings to a global company, still, you know, held by the same family. It's incredibly impressive to me. So that's enough about my weekend. I was starstruck the whole time. It's an amazing time. And I understand why so many people like the climate there in Southern California. You know, we came back to Maryland and it was suddenly mid to late fall. And so I get all that. And I'm very excited for you guys to see these teeny tiny sprinklers in operation. Thanks so much.